Today we are going to be talking about the most primal lift, the most common sense, basic thing that every young man asks another young man. Do you think you could pick that up off the ground? Now specifically, we're going to talk about a 1,000-pound deadlift. It wasn't that long ago that no one had done it. The first time a 1,000-pound deadlift was done was in 2006. That's only 17 years ago. And here we are with it sort of seeming commonplace. It might not be that it's not impressive anymore, because it's obviously still very impressive, but I know for a fact there are multiple people out there pulling 1,000 pounds who I've never heard of. Personally, my best of 1,047 at the time, that was third best all time behind Thor and Eddie. And now that Thor is back, it's possible that if he's given the opportunity, maybe 505 is Thor's to claim, maybe 510, maybe 515. Pop in the comments, what do you think Thor could be capable of by the end of this year, maybe early next year, if his strength continues to progress the way that it is? Before we get stuck into the current record, where it might go, sumo, conventional, the current state of the deadlift, let's take ourselves back in time and figure out, when was this actually deemed to be a thing? The deadlift was first thought to be a thing. The first recording of a deadlift is in the 6th century BC on the Greek island of Thera, where archaeologists stumbled upon an unearthed massive boulder, and on it, it was inscribed that Critobulus lifted me from the ground. It was said that he lifted it from ground to waist, and in essence, that is a deadlift. But with my work as a clinical exercise physiologist, picking something up off the ground or deadlifting is just a fundamental human movement pattern. So it's something we've been doing forever. But it really started to get formalized in 1700s and 1800s, when strength pioneers really started to change the game of strength. They were performers, they were circus entertainers, but they were making a living from lifting weights, and deadlifting was sort of a part of that, and it became quite popular amongst these people well before it hit the mainstream. And that takes us to the 1900s. In the 1900s, up came a guy who seemed to really popularize the deadlift. He was a circus performer, and his name was Herman Gorner. He was famous for doing crazy feats of strength. He deadlifted very, very close to 800 pounds, and he did a one-handed deadlift with 727 pounds. There are books on this guy, there's a biography on this guy. He also did some wild stuff, like wrestling an elephant. One-arm snatched 169 pounds, clean and jerk 330 pounds. And back in the day, when it was a circus act, we didn't have beautiful row calibrated plates. You wouldn't have had a perfect barbell to train on either. They didn't have standard commercial gyms. It would have been a very difficult thing for him to train, never mind perfect and execute really well. And if these weights are real, a one-handed deadlift of 727 pounds is something that I can confidently say, I don't know if I could do it or not, but I certainly wouldn't try for fear of my shoulder popping out. Cue the video of the guy who absolutely ripped his shoulder out of the socket. It's so bad. As the deadlift's popularity began to grow in the 1930s and 1940s, so did the record-setting numbers, and this is our first record of them starting to become a little bit more official, when in Olympic weightlifting competitions, they would allow them to do quote-unquote odd lifts. And this is where we see the overhead press, the strict overhead press come in, where they're bent in half like I am on my log press. Now, deadlift was one of those lifts, and we started to see some records from an actual federation getting recognized. And in 1961, someone from the great country of Canada named Ben Coates, he broke the 750-pound barrier, which was a world record at the time. And he was only around 270 pounds when he did it, which I suppose in nowadays that's not that big at all. But back then, that would probably be like the juiciest, stockiest, biggest guy you've ever seen. It then was 16 years later that we broke 800 pounds by Vince Anello, an absolute powerlifting legend. It wasn't long after 900 pounds was broken by Dan Wolber, who pushed a little over 900 pounds, and he was only 290 pounds in body weight. In 1991, along came Ed Cohen, which I've had the privilege of meeting in person, and he is not someone who overwhelms you with his stature. He's not someone where you look at and go, this could be one of the strongest people who has ever lived, but he certainly punches well above his weight. And he proved that. He deadlifted 901 pounds at only 220 pounds of body weight. This is considered to be one of the most impressive strength feats of all time, and is really a standalone lift in terms of percentage of body weight. We're talking 4 times plus body weight pull. That would be the equivalent of me pulling around 1250 to 1300 pounds, which would be 150 pounds, 160 pounds over the current world record. We wouldn't be talking about 501, 505, we'd be talking about 550. And that is something that is absolutely not possible. Of course, that's not how strength progresses. That's not a perfect comparison, but it should give you some sort of idea that all the way back in 1991, 4 years before I was born, Ed Cohen, only 220 pounds, pulling 901 pounds is insane. Before we get to the first person to pull 1,000 pounds, I'm sure a lot of you want to maximize your deadlift and maximize your training. In the link in the description, we've got our Deadlift PDF program. This is 12 weeks of education, which goes over all of the techniques, core bracing, all of the reasons for the programming, as well as 12 weeks of the program. This is the exact program I used to max my deadlift at 475 kilos. The same program I also used to win Static Monsters. You can do it in a commercial gym, and there are options for both with a suit and without a suit. So you'll be able to be taken care of regardless. Go ahead and check that out. Now that gets us to an incredible strength barrier. The first person to lift 4 digits off of the ground. The first 1,000-pound pull was by Englishman, very famous strongman, 2006, Andy Bolton. And he pulled over 1,000 pounds. And just quietly, is there a more powerful name than Andy Bolton? Like the Bolton, it's perfect. And that takes us to 2011. This record continues to progress. Another powerful name for a different reason. When Icelandics became very popular in the sport, we have Benedict Magnusson, and he did the heaviest raw deadlift, which is 1,015. This for me sits in the Ed Cohen category of most impressive things of all time, when he literally did this under powerlifting conditions and without straps. Absolutely wild. And then we get to Eddie Hall. Eddie Hall took the record from 463 kilos all the way up to 500 kilos. Leading up to this, he was telling people that he was going to do it, much like everyone's telling people now that they're going to deadlift 505, and we've failed over and over and over. Because I'm one of those people who said I think I could do it, and I absolutely could not even close. So, yeah. The most mind-blowing part of breaking that barrier was proving to people that it was possible. That is handedly the most impressive feat of strength since, most impressive deadlift feat of strength, I should say, since the 1,000-pound mark was broken by Andy Bolton. So the deadlift record now sits at 500 kilos. Or does it? If you know what I'm talking about, pop your opinion in the comments. I don't know what to say. 501 kilos by Thor probably happened. 500 kilos by Eddie definitely happened in competition. Thor did it during COVID, blah, 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 whatever. It's 500 or 501. What do you think? Pop it in the comments. Since Benedict Magnusson pulled 1,003 pounds in 2006, we've had 25 people pull over 1,000 pounds. I am proudly on this list at 1,047 or 475 kilos. That ties me for the 3rd biggest lift of all time in competition. We have Eddie Hall, Payman, Ivan, Rauno. Sorry, I'm tied for 4th. Me and Pavlo Nakonechny have pulled 475. So I've got the 4th biggest deadlift all time now. Rauno beat us out by 1 kilo. Now, one evening that can't go unmentioned when talking about 1,000-pound deadlifts is the 2021 World Deadlift Championship by Giants Live, where, like I said, remember, 25 people ever have pulled 1,000 pounds. On this evening, we had Evan Singleton, Gebra Pena, Alexei Novikov, Pavlo Nakonechny, Adam Bishop, Nedsman and Bezkovich, and Ivan Makarov. 7 guys pulling 1,000 pounds. 7 of 25 happened in one evening. That is mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. I think one thing to note about these people who are deadlifting these crazy numbers back in the day is that we cannot compare their numbers to what's going on right now. Right now, we've got different bars. They're slightly thinner. They bend a little bit more. We've got plates that sometimes are a little bit bigger. We got elephant bar that bends a little bit more than even a standard bar. We've got straps. We've got figure 6, figure 8s. We've got chalk. We've got deadlift suits. We've got equipment that helps us so much that if we took ourselves all the way back to the conditions that these guys were in, I'm confident that most would still deadlift more today, most top level guys, but it would be much, much closer than the numbers would have you think. To think about where the deadlift might be able to go, we have to first accept that it is not a finite value. We could have 501.1, 501.11, 501.111. There is no limit to what humans can do, but there is a reasonable assumption. Let's say we're not changing suits, we're not changing the bar, we're not changing the plates. I would say the limit of human performance would sit somewhere around the 530 to 540 mark. If someone, and it very well could be Thor, peaked to maximum, had a perfect day, and had a perfect lift, we'd probably end up somewhere in that territory. Again, I'd love to know what you guys think. Do you think I'm talking out my ass, or do you think that's a reasonable assumption? And that's all it is. Assumption and expectation, and being in the industry, that's what I think. Now, the number one controversy I told you that I was gonna talk about and address. Is sumo deadlifting a deadlift? Well, in this context, I don't think so. I think we have to consider it a different lift to conventional deadlifting, and powerlifting is a sport where both of those are allowed. But I don't see both of those lifts equating to each other in any way other than you're picking something up off of the ground. I don't see it as inferior or superior. I just see it as a slightly different modality that you could use, but it's not appropriate to compare the lifts. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. As per always, lift heavy, be kind. We will catch you in the next video. Check out the links in the description for merch and for that deadlift program if you want to get the most out of your deadlift.